I want to direct your attention to the illustrator or whatever screens you are able to see. I went and clipped out various thumbnails that I found about the internet over the last few days. More than ever, our world seems to be inundated with these type of content. Look, the big secret that your doctor doesn't want you to know about. I can't imagine what that would be. Millions of people are uploading videos like these every day. Reclaim your energy with 3 simple daily habits. Let's keep going. What do we have next? How to be more productive. Who doesn't want that, right? Videos upon videos that promise us the fix. Do this to get hired in your next job interview. And of course, there are tons of videos like these all about how to make money. Look you just squeeze lemon on it. That's all it takes, a money doubling trick. Squeeze lemon juice on it. We've got even more, don't we, Josh? Manifest money in 60 seconds, how to make money without business. Do these 5 things to win with money. There are thumbnails like these, I'm sure, on your computer as well, that promise us one quick trick. Do I have one more, Josh? I think that's all of them, right? That's all of them, all right. There are millions of these uploaded to the internet each and every day. And even though we should know better, there's still some small part of us that wants to believe that maybe this really will be the one that works. It's funny, because I think we actually do this in church and with faith sometimes as well. We start to treat faith like just another life hack that's going to put everything into its right place for us. Discipleship becomes what we do to prove to Jesus that we're serious and deserving of his blessings. But we have to understand just how misguided this type of thinking really is. As I read through today's gospel passage, I was left wondering if this type of thinking is exactly the kind of sickness that Jesus was curing when he went from town to town. Because as I read the gospel lesson, I found myself imagining it as if it was happening here in 2026. I pictured Jesus setting out, going through towns and villages and teaching in synagogues and churches, and I imagined him looking out at the crowds who had gathered to hear him speak. And I just think about the stories that he would notice amongst the congregation. He would see people who have so much information coming at them all day long that they no longer know what is true or how to make sense of the world without becoming angry or afraid. Jesus would see people who had followed the script perfectly. People who got the prestigious degree and landed the great career and bought the dream house and yet still felt empty inside. Jesus would see people who constantly click on the next video in hopes of gaining the secret to wealth or health or organization because they believe that if they could just manage their life a little better, then maybe the emptiness would finally disappear. In other words, Jesus would look out at people in 2026, and he would see people that aren't that different than the ones described in the gospel passage. He would see people who are harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. I love, though, how Jesus describes these harassed and helpless crowds. He doesn't use negative language. No, instead, he describes these people that he sees as a plentiful harvest. He does not see them as a hopeless cause. He sees them as a bountiful opportunity. And he sees us in the same way. We are harassed and helpless a lot of the time. And yet, in this damaged state, Jesus knows that we are in the perfect position to receive his grace in a new and meaningful way. Because we're keenly aware of all the ways that the life hacks and the get-rich-quick schemes ultimately don't work. And beyond that, they ultimately don't fix or heal what's broken in our hearts. You see, we have been trying to stay in control, trying to be the ones who save ourselves with clever tricks and new strategies. And deep down we know that even if we get the job or the promotion or the house, that there's a very good possibility that the deeper ache will remain. The satisfaction it provides is always fleeting, because the real problem is that we keep looking to ourselves to do what only God can. At the start of worship this morning, we used these words during the confession and forgiveness. We are captive to sin and cannot free ourselves. And yet we continue to try, don't we? We continue to try to free ourselves from the aching loneliness and the emptiness. We continue to try and rescue ourselves with discipline and goals and plans and purchases, but those things do not teach us how to trust. Instead, they just train us to continue to rely on ourselves rather than on the God who saves. Only the particular, extravagant, freely given love of our Creator can heal these soul-level wounds. We've tried everything else, and it just doesn't work. But notice as well how Jesus responds to the helpless, harassed crowds that he encounters. The text tells us that he has compassion for them. That's a very important word choice. Even though we are captive to sin and unable to free ourselves, we still keep trying, and Jesus sees all this and has compassion for us. The word compassion literally means to suffer with. Jesus sees all the ways that this self-destructive narrative creates more and more suffering for us, and so he comes alongside us in the suffering. This is how God chooses to save. God enters this human world as a person named Jesus, stepping into our confusion, into our suffering, our helplessness, stepping even into death itself. God doesn't save us with good advice or clever tricks or another YouTube video hack. God saves us by entering the mess with us in order to lead us out. I told a story to our confirmation class earlier this year that gets at this exact point, and I want to share it with you now. It's about a man, we're going to call him Greg. Now, one Christmas Eve, as Greg's family headed off to church, he stayed home. He poured himself a glass of wine and sat in his favorite chair by the big family room window. And now, not long after he started reading his book that he had on hand, he heard a loud knock at the window. He jolted upright and peered outside, but it was dark and he could not see what had caused the noise. And so he sat back down, and a little while later he heard another loud knock. Then another, then another. And finally, irritated and a little curious, Greg put on his jacket and went outside. What he found horrified him. In the large oak tree outside the house was a flock of birds. And every few moments, one of them would fly straight into the window, causing the knock. And so Greg tried everything to prevent this. He ran toward the tree to try to scare the birds away. He turned off the lights in the room inside. He tried scattering birdseed and breadcrumbs, and nothing helped. Every few minutes, another bird would fly helplessly toward the glass and crash. Frustrated and tired, Greg finally cried out, "This makes no sense. Stop flying into the window. You're only hurting yourselves, birds." but another loud knock told him that his words had not worked. And then Greg said, "I just wish I could become a bird. If I were a bird like them, then maybe they would listen to me and I could stop this and save them from their self-destruction." And just as he said those words out loud, the church bells down the street rang, signaling the end of the Christmas Eve church service. And that sound startled the birds, and the whole flock flew off into the night sky. And standing there in the cold, Greg put the pieces together and finally understood why God became a human being. It was in order to save us from all our self-destructive mistakes. You see, we cannot free ourselves. But God becomes a human in order to speak our language, in order to know our pain, in order to lead us out of the self-destructive patterns that we constantly insist on. God suffers with us in our mistakes and despair, and more than that, God defeats the powers that hold us. Jesus enters death itself and comes out the other side, so that the helpless are not just comforted, but actually set free. And when you understand that, the end of this gospel lesson this morning makes perfect sense. The gospel ends with Jesus sending the 12 out to continue his work. Because when you have been set free, you can't help but share it. We can stop selling each other life hacks and instead start telling each other the truth. We can stop using shame as a motivator. We get to be the people who speak hope to the exhausted and remind the helpless that there are not failures needing to be fixed, but beloved children who God is already alongside and whom Christ has already gathered in. Because the harvest is plentiful. And the good news is still better than all the other stories in our world that promise to save us, but never can. Amen.